Hello, friends, and oh my gosh, honey, they breached the SSL VPN again. That's right, we are here to talk a little bit about one of the blogs we just released around a very noisy mosquito of a detection known as you've got compromised creds and now you've got a breached SSL VPN again. If that was your guess, you did win it, and this is extremely irritating for our SOC because we wouldn't write a blog on it if we didn't need to spread the gospel that this is extremely a frequently targeted location for a threat actor to start with. I am joined today by a senior MDR analyst and actually one of my favorite red teamer minds, Nevan Beal. Nevan Beal actually authored the blog. Welcome, Nevan.
Thanks, Mac.
So we are looking to understand a little bit about this because look, we all know that we're investing in some of these cybersecurity controls. They're really important, but often we consider one improvement to be an opportunity for new bad guys. Meet that with misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, lack of MFA or privileged control, privileged identity control. It's becoming increasingly more prevalent that these, especially with vulnerabilities lately on the edge, that these types of initial access ripe targets are continuously getting exploited. So we've talked a lot about this in some of our other videos, blogs around the edge appliances and edge devices where, we're really sending out a lot of threat notices. It feels like it's a never-ending list of critical vulnerabilities that are hitting the wild for us. So that goes to show that, unfortunately, things like SonicWall SSL VPN has also, unfortunately, been top of the list. Nevan, can you speak a little bit with all of this in front of us right now? Could you speak a little bit about what the SOC is seeing in our BROC when it comes to these SSL VPN compromises?
No, absolutely. It's exciting to be able to not only write about it, but also give sort of insight onto it as well. We continue to see an uptick into just not targeting edge devices, but also specifically a heavy focus on SSL VPNs, sort of stemming as the initial access for these compromises. These environments all operate with a large variety of different technologies. So there is different configurations. Some may lack proper configuration, MFA patching, strong cred policies, anything of that nature, which is a prime target for a threat actor. A common commonality we see in a lot of these breaches is the use of SonicWall VPNs being a source of the breaches, mainly because a lot of our MSP partners do utilize SonicWall VPNs and also implement them in the customer networks that they support. The authentication portal for the SonicWall is also a heavily targeted target by threat actors. That's a mouthful. Essentially, when it's on the default port 4433 for the SSL VPN, when that's improperly configured, it can be as simple as just a threat actor inputting credentials, hoping MFA is not enabled, and then just gaining access to the internal network.
Easy enough. It sounds super simplistic, which is why we're going to give you a little bit of insight today, hopefully, and definitely read the full blog to break it down even further, because we would really like to help our partners improve their posture. So in some of these cases, just starting from the get-go, what level of methods, I like to say mixology or cocktail, are threat actors using essentially to perform the credential compromise and thus then targeting the exposed VPN next?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of levels, or not levels, there's a lot of methods threat actors can gain access to these appliances. They can purchase compromised credentials from the dark web. They can phish users for their credentials. They can exploit these appliances. They can try cred reuse as well. So in a data breach, someone's password got leaked, start spraying and praying these appliances, see if it sticks for an SSL VPN, and get in that way. These appliances do serve a legitimate purpose. However, without the proper sort of preparation and prevention mechanism put in place, they do serve as an open door for these threat actors.
People will become unpopular, but brute force is still a winning method there. All right, so also what I've noticed in a lot of these cases, we see this common configuration setup where the orgs set up their range, so all of the user traffic is coming to the SSL VPN, would source from a single gateway IP. With these designs, wouldn't that make the combo of no MFA mixed with compromised creds, mixed with a single gateway IP, that detection context a little bit more difficult to determine where it's sourcing from. So can you tell me a little bit about the analysis from that general alerting where we suspect the VPN is that open target, and then what usually comes after?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone's brain works differently. So each customer environment and even like my own network is going to be set up compared differently than yours. Within the SOC, we're focusing on anomalous activity. So activity sourcing from a weird network range, a weird user account, a service account, weird time of day, things of that nature. Typically within these like SSL VPN breaches, we'll see a user account or a service account attempting to move laterally by like spraying and praying shares, RDPing in from the VPN range, things of that nature. When analysts take these events and sort of work these incidents, the main question we're looking for is sort of the 5 Ws: the who, what, where, when, why, and I think how is also included. So take into it.
Back in middle school.
I know,
See?
absolutely. I think how. So main thing is taking like sort of the contextual aspect of it as well. So like, okay, is a user account that works like 9 to 5 Eastern, they should not be RDPing or attempting to mount shares in 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. We can also do OSINT in the job title of the user as well. So okay, what did they do for work? Are they like an executive assistant? If they are, why are they trying to sort of spray and pray accounts from a possible SSL VPN range? So that focus on anomalous activity then leads us into sort of pinpointing down the source of it, which we typically do find it being the SSL VPN. And then after they compromise, it's typically the same cycle, just lateral movement, cred dumps, persistence. So dropping like AnyDesk, RustDesk, malicious files to beacon back out to C2, and then anything to help them get to action on objectives as soon as possible.
Layers of validation to anyone who needs to know what a triage looks like in some of these cases. So interestingly enough, in a lot of these incidents where the SSL VPN is both compromised, and one of the case studies I believe in the blog too, we've seen some correlated pre-ransomware attack intelligence where groups like specifically Akira and Fog, which we've seen before out in the wild, they have these overlapping TTPs where they actually use similar exploits. One of them is not just SonicWall, but also Veeam. So as an analyst, where do we start to see this path of these operators smell a little funny because they're starting with, something like exploiting SonicWall, and then they're going to eventually pivot over to the Veeam backup services? We also know why they would go to the backup services that soon, but what are some additional attacker opportunities once you've done, initial access, lateral movement, straight up to the backup services? What do we see them typically do after that?
No, yeah, it depends on the threat group, but people are creatures of habit. As the saying goes, don't fix what ain't broke. Especially like I have specific tools and techniques when I'm doing anything offensive that I stick to because it's what you're comfortable with. Threat actors are the same way. They're going to stick to the tools, the techniques that they're used to because that's what they're good at. That's why they are threat actors and they're able to breach these networks. Typically, after gaining the successful access to the SSL VPN, they'll try to enumerate privileges on the host, enumerate the environment, sort of see where their creds stick. So if they pop a user account, see what else they can access with that user account, whether it's through just spray and pray from the SSL VPN range, or they're dropping binaries on disks, such as like sharp shares or netscan, that will help them sort of enumerate the shares they have access to on the devices within the network, as well as drop as any necessary tools as they go. But back to the sort of creatures of habit, these threat actors, they're TTPs. So once we see the SSL VPN being popped, it also depends on how they're moving, sort of what they're doing, the time that they're choosing to take to try and get action on objectives. But typically you'll start seeing it's the same process with different flavors, as I'll say it. Just depending on what they're comfortable with, sort of the same, and they all have the same end goal. They'll just do different moves to get to that end goal.
So, especially in those cases, what would you say on average is the time from that initial access to enumeration and data exfil?
Absolutely. It depends on the group. We can put it to like an analogy of a bank robbery or like I'd say bank robbery is a good one, but more of like it's either the smash and grab approach or they take a week to plan out and say like week to plan out, week to actually execute it, and then a week to actually get the data out. Most threat actors are impatient, so it's more of the smash and grab approach of breach the SSL VPN and try and get what they can as quickly as possible, while others will try and sort of lay low and see what they can get to without trying to, I guess, alert whoever's within the network, whoever's watching the network.
I wanted to know, did you have an example of like when we talk about this triage time and how long we typically see them, what are those first alerts that you have to do when we're looking at, again, like those instances where we're just trying to determine it's a VPN connection? Do you have examples of that?
Let me share my screen. Let me know once we can see it.
Good.
Awesome.
Safety sharing here.
Safety sharing. It's always safety sharing.
We love the redaction.
My OCD is bugging me on that one, but that is okay. So on the left, we have an example of what a alert would look like when we have an SSL VPN compromise. For a regular user account, we see it coming from a 192.168.15.1, which is the gateway IP, if I remember correctly. So depending on the network setup, traffic for the SSL VPN may be sourcing from the gateway, or it may be sourcing from a different range. In this case, this specific IP was mounting devices within the target network, which is redacted. But this is typically what we're seeing would be activity sourcing from like either .1 or a different IP range, which if you can do some further investigation, pinpoint it down to the SSL VPN. On the right is an example of when they actually exploit specific firewalls or specific appliances, pardon me. For example, a commonality with a lot of the FortiOS devices is exploitation of them will gain the threat actor access to the LDAP account. So a lot of times we'll see like a Citrix LDAP account or an LDAP account or just anything LDAP in general attempting to RDP and move laterally in the network, which is a major red flag, as an LDAP account should never be doing that type of activity.
Well, right out of the gate, we're at least getting alerts. We can tell. I would imagine that the VPN or the gateway IP range is like, all right, this is going to take a little bit more time, but Citrix, all that, like you said, is usually a good red flag from the beginning for analysts.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's wrap it up. We always like to wrap it up with prevention, safety first. So we know the basics. Step one, make sure your VPN is patched, right? This is something we're seeing an increase in critical vulnerabilities of, and especially if something exposed publicly makes it even easier. Implementation then from proper identity access and making sure unauthorized access, especially to that said auth portal, is probably pretty important. What else can we give them, Nevan?
Another big one is just, I would say, understanding the user groups within the SSL VPN group. So understand who has access to the SSL VPN. Should they have access to the SSL VPN? Are there any service accounts within the SSL VPN group? If the service account needs to be in the SSL VPN group, just ensure it has a strong password and placement. Make sure it's not like the username is the same as a password kind of thing, because that's a quick account to be compromised with a spray and pray. Privileged identity management, and I'd say the biggest thing after all is those are all sort of prevention for SSL VPN compromises, just good user control, but also a big harp on application control, because a lot of scenarios we see in the SOC are threat actors will breach the SSL VPN, sort of work towards their action on objectives, and that includes dropping binaries or using applications such as like rclone or FileZilla for data exfiltration. Application control, so knowing what should be in your environment and blocking what's not supposed to be in your environment, can save a company from having data exfiltrated. And we've seen it many times with Mac managed application control, Blackpoint's application control, blocking rclone, FileZilla, things of that nature. Finally, just MDR is your friend. So having a good SOC is also always a good recommendation.
Yeah, this has been a plug for MDR, but we usually do wrap up with, this is why you have MDR. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending time on these case studies. All right, everyone. Well, you heard it here first from Nevan and I. Take some time to read our blog if you want to get a lot of those details and how that attack chain looks, as well as starting to sit down and say, maybe we need to evaluate the posture of our edge in general. So take some time. And then if you have any questions, like and follow our socials. But if you're a partner of ours, reach out to us. We're happy to discuss this a little bit further. Thanks for joining me, Nevan. As always, everyone, stay vigilant.